The gravel path was uneven beneath her boots, and with every step, the weight of the fog seemed to thicken around her. The church rose in the distance like a monument that time had abandoned, its walls cracked and weathered, its steeple stretching jaggedly into the pale sky. As she drew closer, the stillness became unsettling, unnatural, almost suffocating. There were no insects buzzing, no birds shifting in the trees, not even the faint rustle of wind. It was as if the entire world held its breath the moment she set her eyes on the church. When she reached the doors, they stood slightly open, groaning faintly as the night air pushed against them. Yet even that sound felt swallowed before it could truly exist. Inside, the silence wrapped around her like a living thing. The air was damp and cold, carrying the faint odor of mildew and candle wax long since burned away. The wooden pews stretched in endless rows, shadowed and dust-coated, as if frozen in time. She could hear her own heart hammering, each beat magnified, in her chest, and even that felt like it didn't belong here. Every step she took forward seemed too loud, her boots pressing against floorboards that groaned reluctantly before falling back into the heavy, oppressive quiet. It was a silence that didn't feel empty but full, as though the walls themselves were listening. Her breath felt harsh in her throat, and when she exhaled, it came out like a violation of whatever sacred hush had taken hold. Even the faint flicker of her phone's flashlight seemed out of place, its glow swallowed before it could reach the furthest corners. The silence pressed closer with every heartbeat, a weight she could feel settling into her bones, a presence she could not see but could not deny. The first few steps down the center aisle felt almost manageable, but then it came the sound she wasn't supposed to hear, a faint scuff, a deliberate shuffle that didn't belong to her. Her body locked instantly, her breath snagging in her chest as her ears strained against the thick quiet. The sound came again from above, where the choir balcony loomed like a mouth of blackness. She lifted her light toward it, but the beam faltered against the heavy shadows, swallowed whole before it could reveal anything. Yet she knew she wasn't imagining it. The way the silence bent around the noise, the way the air seemed to throb in response, made the presence undeniable. Someone was moving up there, unseen but aware of her, waiting for her to notice. Her heart pounded harder, echoing in her ears. Yet the shuffling stopped the moment she focused on it. That pause was worse than the sound itself. It meant whatever lingered above was listening back, playing a careful game of stillness with her. She tried to convince herself the building was shifting, that old wooden forgotten beams were settling into the night, but the truth pressed against her chest like ice. This wasn't the groan of the church. It was footsteps that she forced herself a step forward, each creak of the floor beneath her boots answering the unspoken rhythm above. It felt like mirroring, a careful mimicry meant to remind her she was never alone here. The weight of eyes pressed from the darkness, heavy and relentless, following her every move with an unnatural patience. She dared to look again, lifting the trembling beam of her light toward the balcony. But the shadows held steady, unbroken, as though something waited just out of reach. Crouched and watching, the air inside the church had grown colder, so still, that it carried the feeling of being sealed inside a place that no longer belonged to the world outside. She tried to keep moving, each step a whisper against the warped wooden floor, but then came a sound that froze her where she stood, a slow creak to her left, followed by another to her right, echoing softly in the cavernous dark. Her eyes darted toward the pews, rows of them stretching endlessly, empty and dust-choked. At first she thought it was her imagination, but the sound came again, wooden benches groaning as though bearing weight. It wasn't random. One by one, the pews seemed to shift as if unseen figures were lowering themselves into place, filling the silence with their slow, deliberate movements. Her light shook in her trembling hand, scattering across the church, but nothing appeared where the sounds came from. The pews remained still, the shadows untouched, yet the noises continued, creak after creak, pressing closer together, rising like a tide, until it sounded as though an entire congregation had returned to their seats. Her throat tightened as the realization sank in. Whatever was here wasn't content with simply hiding in the dark. It wanted her to know she was surrounded. She tried to breathe quietly, to keep her chest from heaving, but every intake of air seemed louder than thunder. Against the growing quiet, the silence bent unnaturally between the groans, as if dozens of breaths were being drawn around her in perfect unison. The air grew heavier, the shadows thicker, and she could feel the invisible crowd closing in. Each crick was a reminder that she wasn't walking through an abandoned church anymore, but standing in the middle of something that had been waiting for her. Arrival all along hurts. Hands trembled as she steadied the weak light of her phone, forcing it toward the choir balcony once more. The beam quivered across the jagged railings, splintered wood jutting outward like broken teeth. The darkness beyond was suffocating, swallowing every trace of illumination before it could reach the far corners. She knew she wasn't alone, the heaviness of that realization pressing against her chest with unbearable weight. The silence didn't just feel like silence anymore. It felt like something hiding, something deliberate, something that was holding its breath as she inched forward. Then, as her light swayed and lingered just long enough, she saw it. A shape leaning forward from the shadows, its outline faint, yet undeniable. The figure's head tilted slowly to the side, not like a curious person, but with a slack, unnatural bend that made her stomach lurch. It moved as though the bones inside had forgotten how they were meant to function. A grotesque mimicry of human posture. She blinked hard, hoping her vision betrayed her, but when her eyes opened again, the shadow remained. The longer she stared, the more certain she became that it had been there all along, hidden, waiting, watching. Her throat tightened with the desperate urge to call out, but the words died before they could form. She didn't need to ask if someone was there. She already knew. Her phone light flickered, the battery struggling, casting quick jerks of brightness and dark that made the figure seem to twitch with every lapse. Each tilt of its head seemed deeper, sharper, until it looked as though it would snap entirely. She could not see its face, only the hollow impression of where it should have been, and that absence was worse than anything her imagination tried to fill in. Her body screamed to turn back, but her legs refused to obey, rooted by the knowledge that moving too quickly might draw it closer. The weight of its gaze was unbearable, a pressure digging into her skin, a pull that made her feel as though she were being studied, measured, dissected. She couldn't look away, and the shadow refused to move. The two of them locked in a silent standoff that stretched longer than she could endure. The silence grew heavier, no longer empty, but brimming with something unseen, something vast and suffocating. She could feel it pressing against her skin, curling into her ears, crawling down her spine like invisible hands. Then came the sound, or rather, the absence of it. A murmur, too faint to call words, rose in the air around her, though no mouth spoke it. It wasn't sound in the way she understood it, but a whisper without voice, a vibration that made her bones ache and her stomach twist. Her breath caught, chest tightening as she spun in place, but every corner of the church remained empty. Her light cutting across pews and shadows without revealing anything tangible. The murmurs grew stronger, overlapping, countless voices speaking in silence, their tone urgent, heavy, insistent, as though she had trespassed into a sermon meant for no living soul. The air chilled, and the flicker of her light revealed nothing yet suggested everything. Between the empty rows she felt movement, not seen but sensed, as though countless figures leaned closer, their unseen faces brushing against her awareness. Each whisper without sound circled her like smoke, weaving through the silence, making her ears ring as if her mind itself was being filled. She turned back toward the balcony, and though the figure had moved, she felt it command the chorus around her, unseen eyes from every direction pinning her in place. The weight of being watched multiplied until her skin prickled and her knees threatened to buckle. Her chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. Her throat too tight for breath, the whispers pressed closer, layering, folding in on themselves until it became impossible to tell where one ended and another began. She could feel the space shrinking, the walls closing around her, though they had not shifted an inch. The congregation she could not see but could feel was all around her, their presence undeniable, their attention suffocating. The shadows in the pews seemed deeper now, darker, as if they concealed more than emptiness. The whispers grew so loud in their silence that her skull throbbed with the pressure, her eyes watering from the weight of it, her body trembling under the certainty that she was no longer a guest here but the center of whatever had gathered.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.